Of all the stories Animal Quest covered in 2025, there are a few that still haunt me. These weren't just wild animal sightings. They were the most horrifying encounters we investigated that year. I want to share one of them now. It was October 7th, 2016. The affluent Wildwood Heights neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado, was still quiet in the early morning darkness. This upscale residential area, built just 5 years earlier on the edge of the Rocky Mountain foothills, had winding streets lined with modern homes that backed onto open space. Wildlife corridors, really. Lisa Hartwell, a 33-year-old marketing coordinator, was starting her daily 5 a.m. jog through the neighborhood. She'd moved to Wildwood Heights 2 years earlier, drawn by the promise of mountain living with urban conveniences. A dedicated fitness enthusiast, she kept a strict exercise schedule, often rising before dawn to complete her 5-mile run before heading to the office. This morning routine was sacred to her, a peaceful time to clear her mind while enjoying the crisp mountain air and stunning views. The neighborhood had been experiencing an unusually dry autumn, with drought conditions extending well into what should have been the wet season. Local wildlife officials had issued warnings about increased animal activity in residential areas, as deer, elk, and their predators were being forced closer to human settlements in search of water. Several residents had reported mountain lion sightings over the past month, including tracks in backyards and a large cat spotted near the community's retention pond. Lisa had heard about the warnings, but dismissed them as typical Colorado mountain living concerns. She continued her early morning runs without altering her route or carrying any deterrent, confident that her familiar neighborhood streets were safe. Mountain lions, also known as cougars or pumas, are North America's second largest wildcat species. Adult males weigh between 115 and 220 pounds. These powerful predators are perfectly adapted for hunting in mountainous terrain, possessing incredible stealth, speed, and jumping ability. They can leap vertically up to 15 feet and horizontally up to 45 feet. Mountain lions are primarily ambush hunters, relying on surprise attacks, typically targeting the neck and spine of their prey to deliver quick, fatal bites. As Lisa jogged through the pre-dawn darkness, she was completely unaware that a 140-pound male mountain lion had been stalking a mule deer through the drainage culvert that ran beneath the street she was approaching. Lisa's approach disrupted the hunt, startling both the deer and the mountain lion. The deer bolted across the street and disappeared into the darkness, leaving the frustrated predator crouched in the shadows of the concrete drainage opening. The attack came without warning as Lisa passed within 10 feet of the culvert. The mountain lion exploded from the shadows with incredible speed, covering the distance in a single leap. His massive front paws struck Lisa between the shoulder blades with devastating force, sending her crashing face first onto the asphalt while his weight drove her to the ground. Lisa's attempts to scream were cut short as the mountain lion's powerful jaws clamped down on the back of her neck. His 4-inch canine teeth punctured through muscle and vertebrae with crushing force. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Lisa's back and shoulders, each swipe opening deep gashes that severed major blood vessels and caused massive tissue damage. The 140-pound cat used his incredible strength to pull Lisa's body across the asphalt and down into the concrete culvert, where the darkness and confined space would provide protection while he fed. Lisa's body was recovered 3 hours later by a joint team of police officers and Colorado Parks and wildlife personnel. The mountain lion had abandoned his kill when the search teams approached, retreating further into the drainage network that connected to the natural creek system beyond the neighborhood. Lisa had died from massive trauma to her neck and spine. The mountain lion's killing bite was instantly fatal. The investigation revealed that Lisa had been jogging along her usual route when she inadvertently interrupted the mountain lion's hunt, triggering the attack that cost her life. The mountain lion was tracked and euthanized the following day, after being located in the foothills above the neighborhood. I remember when I first read the report on this case. The sheer suddenness of the attack was chilling. And, unfortunately, it wasn't an isolated incident. On August 19, 2017, Felicity Grant arrived at Boulder County Open Space in Colorado. This vast wilderness area is known for its rugged terrain and diverse wildlife population. The mountainous region stretches across thousands of acres of dense forest and winding trails, attracting outdoor enthusiasts. But these same wilderness areas also serve as prime habitat for mountain lions and other dangerous predators. Felicity Grant, a 39-year-old fitness influencer from Denver with over 5,000 social media followers, had planned what she called her ultimate wilderness transformation experience. Known for her entitled attitude and the belief that her athletic superiority made her exempt from rules, she had already caused multiple confrontations at the park entrance. Her demanding personality became evident when she berated the teenage park attendant for suggesting she read the safety guidelines, claiming someone of her fitness level didn't need advice from minimum wage employees. Park Ranger Tom Bradley had attempted to brief Felicity on recent mountain lion activity during her permit application process. The area had experienced multiple cougar sightings over the previous month, including aggressive encounters that resulted in temporary trail clos. Felicity became increasingly hostile, interrupting Tom repeatedly. I find myself drawn to stories of survival, of how creatures adapt and endure in the face of overwhelming odds. But sometimes the story is not one of triumph, but a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of the wild. Felicity, as I read in the reports, was not interested in warnings. She dismissed concerns about solo hiking at dawn, even tearing down warning signs on the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail, believing her athletic prowess made her invulnerable. She even went so far as to cruelly dismiss those who tried to warn her. Mountain lions, the apex predators of these terrains, are perfectly adapted for hunting. A male can weigh up to 180 pounds, stretch over 8 feet, and leap 40 feet in a single bound. Their retractable claws, 4 inches long, and canine teeth, also 4 inches, are designed for lethal precision. Felicity began her run at 5:30 a.m., blasting music through noise-canceling headphones, carrying raw steaks in her backpack. The erratic movements, heavy breathing, and the scent of fresh meat created the ideal conditions to attract a hunter. A 140-pound male mountain lion, already hunting in the area, detected the scent from over a mile away. He stalked her along the ridge, using the terrain to remain hidden. As she rounded a bend, the lion positioned himself 15 feet above the path. When she passed beneath, oblivious, the mountain lion launched a devastating aerial attack. The predator struck with tremendous force, claws raking down her back, paws wrapping around her shoulders and neck. The mountain lion's teeth found their mark, clamping down on her neck with surgical precision, severing her spinal cord. The prez exceeded 400 pounds per square inch, fracturing vertebrae and causing instant paralysis. Within 2 minutes, Felicity was gone, the result of spinal cord severance, massive blood loss, and suffocation. The mountain lion dragged her body off the trail. 3 days later, a search and rescue team found her remains. It was December 3rd, 2014. Fluorescent lights buzzed over the kennels at the county animal shelter. A young veterinary student named Jennifer Walsh walked between the cages. She believed every animal deserved a second chance, especially the difficult ones. She gravitated toward the aggressive cases, the dogs marked for euthanization. One of these was Diesel, a 75-pound pit bull with a scarred muzzle and eyes that held what seemed like years of rage. He'd been surrendered after multiple bite incidents, including an attack on a child. He was deemed too dangerous for adoption, scheduled for euthanization. Jennifer had been watching Diesel, looking for a glimpse of the gentle soul she believed lay beneath. She saw him pace, growl, destroy toys. But she also saw moments of what she interpreted as vulnerability, when he pressed against the wall, softening when he thought no one was watching. Protocol was clear. Dogs like Diesel were never to be handled alone. But Jennifer convinced herself that his aggression was fear-based, that he needed one-on-one attention. On that December afternoon, with staff busy, Jennifer made a decision that would cost her everything. She approached Diesel. "I keep thinking about Jennifer, the young woman who dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Her story is a stark reminder that good intentions can never replace experience and respect for animal behavior. It ended so tragically. She was preparing to evaluate Diesel, a 75-pound dog, in the shelter's isolation room. Diesel's body language was a clear warning: bared teeth, raised hackles, a low growl. But she interpreted his aggression as fear. When she opened the kennel, Diesel paused, seeming to assess her position. That hesitation gave her a fatal confidence. She slipped a lead around his neck and guided him into the small, bare isolation room. Once inside, she removed the lead, thinking it would help him relax. But there was nowhere to run in that 8-10-foot space. For minutes, Diesel stood rigid, his eyes fixed on Jennifer. She sat and spoke to him gently, unaware she was being evaluated by a predator. The attack came when she stood and stepped toward him, hand extended in what she meant as a peaceful gesture. To Diesel, it was a threat. Jessica's attempts to break free only seemed to increase King's aggressive behavior as he interpreted her struggles as continued threats to his territory. Her movements grew weaker as massive blood loss and crushing injuries overwhelmed her body. King's grip never loosened as he continued to pull her against the barrier, his territorial fury focused entirely on eliminating what he perceived as an intrusion into his domain. Within minutes, Jessica's struggle ceased as King's brutal assault proved fatal. The massive gorilla maintained his grip on her lifeless form, while displaying threatening behavior toward anyone who approached the enclosure. Emergency responders arrived with tranquilizer equipment, but Jessica was already dead from massive trauma. The investigation revealed that Sunshine Primate Sanctuary had been operating as an illegal roadside zoo, exploiting both animals and visitors for profit while providing inadequate safety measures and animal care. The facility was immediately raided and shut down by state authorities, with all primates relocated to legitimate sanctuaries. King was transferred to an accredited facility with proper containment and enrichment programs, where he could live out his remaining years in conditions appropriate for his species. Jessica's death prompted enhanced regulations for facilities claiming to operate as animal sanctuaries and stricter enforcement of existing wildlife protection laws. Her family established a foundation supporting legitimate primate conservation efforts, ensuring that her genuine passion for animal welfare would continue through organizations that truly protected great apes, rather than exploiting them for profit. It was March 18th, 2017, and the upscale Asheville, North Carolina neighborhood of Mountain View Estates was experiencing the first warm evening of spring. The residential development, built on the slopes of the Blue Ridge Mountains, featured large lots with mature trees and natural landscaping that blended seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Maria Santos, a 41-year-old single mother and part-time dog walker, was making her evening rounds through the neighborhood's winding streets, caring for the pets of wealthy residents who relied on her services. Maria had been working as a professional dog walker for 3 years, building a loyal clientele among Mountain View Estates' affluent homeowners, who appreciated her reliability and genuine love of animals. She often walked multiple dogs simultaneously, managing up to 6 animals at once while maintaining perfect control and ensuring each pet received individual attention. Maria's income from dog walking helped supplement her day job at a local veterinary clinic, allowing her to support her teenage daughter as a single parent. The Mountain View Estates development had been carved out of pristine mountain forest, with builders required to preserve mature trees and maintain natural wildlife corridors throughout the community. Recent construction of additional homes had disrupted established animal movement patterns, forcing bears, deer, and other wildlife to seek new routes through residential areas. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission had issued warnings about increased bear activity in mountain communities, particularly as animals emerged from winter hibernation. Maria was aware of the wildlife warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during her 3 years of walking dogs in the neighborhood. She carried pepper spray as a precaution and had received training on wildlife encounters from the local animal control office. On this particular evening, she was walking 3 large dogs, 2 German Shepherds and a Golden Retriever, along the community's main street when she noticed unusual activity near a row of garbage cans. Black bears are North America's most common bear species, with adult females typically weighing between 200 and 400 pounds. Mother bears with cubs are extremely protective and will attack any perceived threat to their offspring. I've read accounts of bear attacks, and one detail always stays with me: their speed. When surprised or cornered, a bear can run up to 35 miles per hour. They have the strength to break down doors and overturn cars. Their claws and teeth are capable of inflicting devastating injuries. Maria discovered this firsthand when she approached an intersection one morning. Several garbage cans had been placed there for pickup, and a 300-pound female black bear with two small cubs was rummaging through them. The mother bear had torn open several bags and was feeding on discarded food while her cubs played nearby. Maria immediately recognized the danger and began backing away slowly. But the three dogs she was walking became agitated and started barking aggressively at the bears. The mother bear's protective instincts were immediately triggered. She perceived the barking dogs as a direct threat to her cubs' safety. She rose to her full height and began making aggressive vocalizations, positioning herself between the dogs and her offspring. Maria tried to control the excited animals and retreat to a safe distance, but the dogs continued barking and lunging, escalating the dangerous situation. The 300-pound mother bear charged toward Maria and the dogs with explosive speed, covering the 30 yards between them in seconds. Maria attempted to run while holding 3 leashes, but became entangled and fell hard onto the asphalt street. The dogs scattered in different directions, leaving Maria vulnerable and unable to escape as the enraged bear approached. The mother bear's massive paws struck Maria's back and shoulders with bone-crushing force, driving her face first into the pavement. Maria's death prompted immediate changes to Mountain View Estate's waste management protocols, including the installation of bear-proof garbage containers and new guidelines for refuge. The community also implemented an early warning system for wildlife sightings and began requiring all residents to remove potential attractants from their properties. It was October 15th, 2016, and the Georgia sun was setting over Rebecca Martinez's 10-acre property, casting long shadows across a maze of makeshift kennels and chain-link runs. The constant barking that echoed across the land had become the soundtrack of her life. 40 rescue dogs, each one carrying the scars of abuse, neglect, or abandonment. At 34, Rebecca had spent 8 years building her unofficial sanctuary, taking in the dogs that other shelters wouldn't touch. The aggressive ones, the biters, the animals marked for immediate euthanization. Her recent divorce had left her financially strained and emotionally isolated, with only her dogs for company on the remote property. Rebecca's neighbors had grown used to the noise, though some whispered concerns about the woman who seemed to care more about dangerous animals than her own safety. She rarely left the property anymore, moving between encloses with hands scarred from countless bites, badges of honor in her mind. Friends who still visited noticed the changes in Rebecca over the months. She'd grown thinner, more withdrawn, speaking more about her dogs than anything else. Her ex-husband had tried to warn her about the dangers, but Rebecca dismissed his concerns as jealousy over her dedication. The local veterinarian had stopped making house calls after Rex had lunged at him through a fence gap, requiring stitches on his forearm. Even the feed delivery drivers had begun leaving supplies at the gate rather than approaching the main compound. The main enclosure housed her three largest rescues: Rex, a 90-pound pit bull mix with a history of severe abuse; Titan, an 85-pound Rottweiler cross; and Scar, a 75-pound mixed breed whose face told the story of his fighting past. What Rebecca didn't realize was that these three had been forming an alliance over the past few weeks, establishing a hierarchy that put them at odds with anyone who came between them and food. The warning signs had been there for anyone trained to recognize them. The three dogs had begun sleeping closer together, sharing food bowls, and displaying coordinated territorial behavior when other dogs approached. They'd started following Rebecca's movements more intently during feeding times, their body language shifting from grateful anticipation to something more predatory. But Rebecca, exhausted from managing 40 animals alone and emotionally invested in seeing progress, I've always found it unsettling how easily the line blurs between savior and prey. How quickly an act of compassion can be misinterpreted, twisted by instinct. I remember reading about a woman named Rebecca who ran an unlicensed dog rescue. She had saved these animals, nursed them back to health. But one evening, that all changed. Rebecca's daily feeding routine was always the most dangerous part of her day. I can picture her filling those 5 buckets with kibble, the metallic clanging echoing and sending the dogs into a frenzy. The ground was still wet from a thunderstorm when she approached the main enclosure, buckets in hand. The 3 large dogs pressed against the fence, their eyes locked on the food. She'd done this thousands of times before, but this night felt different. As Rebecca unlatched the gate and stepped into the enclosure, her boots slipped on the muddy ground. She stumbled, the buckets crashing to the earth, spilling kibble across the wet dirt. Rex was the first to move. But as Rebecca struggled to get back on her feet, something shifted in his demeanor. His eyes, once focused on the kibble, now locked onto her. In that moment, she wasn't the woman who had saved him. She was competition. The attack came without warning. Rex, all 90 pounds of him, slammed into Rebecca's chest, driving her back to the ground. His jaws clamped down on her shoulder, tearing through flesh. Her scream pierced the evening air, but there was no one around for miles to hear it. Titan and Scar joined the assault within seconds, their pack instincts overriding years of rehabilitation. Titan's massive jaws found her left arm. Scar circled behind, his teeth sinking into her legs, dragging her further from the gate. Rebecca fought desperately, her free hand clawing at Rex's face, trying to break his grip. But the dogs were in full predatory mode now, their attacks coordinated and relentless. Blood soaked into the muddy ground as they continued their assault, their growls mixing with Rebecca's weakening cries. The feeding frenzy lasted nearly 10 minutes before the dogs finally backed away. Rebecca lay motionless in the mud, her body broken and torn, surrounded by the scattered kibble that had triggered the attack. For 3 days, Rebecca's body remained undiscovered on the isolated property. It wasn't until a delivery driver arrived with dog food that the scene was uncovered. Animal control officers found the 3 attacking dogs still in the enclosure, showing no signs of continued aggression. Rex, Titan, and Scar were euthanized within hours, along with 12 other dogs deemed too dangerous for relocation. Rebecca's death sparked debates about unlicensed rescue operations, and new regulations were implemented, requiring permits for anyone housing more than 10 rescue animals. But for those who knew Rebecca, the rules came too late. It reminds me of another case, this one in France. It was April 3rd, 2017, at the Thor Zoo Safari Park. The wolf sector, adjacent to the bison paddock, was meant to mimic the wild stillness of Yellowstone. Yet, within the shadows of its pines, something stirred. A quiet rhythm of movement that would soon break that silence for good. Camille Morel was 29, a fitness instructor from Versailles. After 6 months of non-stop classes at her studio, she decided to spend a weekend at the Thor Zoo Safari, one of the few places near Paris offering guests an overnight wilderness immersion without leaving the country. She'd stayed once before and remembered the tranquility of waking to animal sounds instead of traffic. She booked the chalet not just for rest, but to keep her running habit intact in the open air. The park's trails and guest roads were well marked and safe during visiting hours. She'd read the safety pamphlet about restricted areas and believed her familiarity with the grounds made her cautious enough. Her chalet overlooked the fenced wolf sector adjacent to the bison range, a layout designed to reduce mixed species stress and liability during guest drives. The animals were separated by natural barriers and double fence zones, and guests were told the viewing area was completely secure. Camille trusted the system. Her goal that morning was simple: a quick 2-mile jog before breakfast, the same as she did every morning at home. The zoo's landscape was a strange fusion of natural calm and controlled wilderness. Pine trees in neat clusters, sandy trails, and an artificial stream running through the land. At dawn, the service road and the inner track appeared nearly identical, a known issue in drive-through parks where early light flattens contrast. Beyond the chalet's edge stretched a gravel service road used by rangers and tour jeeps. The wolves' territory extended across nearly 20 acres of wooded ground. Grey wolves, the largest of the canids, can weigh over 100 pounds and run up to 35 miles per hour for short bursts. Pack behavior revolves around cooperation and hierarchy. Most attacks on humans occur only when the animals feel threatened, cornered, or see unusual movement that triggers pursuit. In captivity, stress or broken boundaries can alter those instincts. That morning, a scheduled maintenance check had delayed some of the park's early operations. Workers had opened an internal service gate near the chalet to move a small utility vehicle through. Overnight, frost had iced the latch mechanism, preventing full engagement of the double lock. And when one of the workers received a call about a mechanical issue elsewhere, he left under maintenance override without confirming it was secure. The gate's interlock was meant to be re-engaged once staff passed, a step that failed. Around 7 a.m., Camille stepped outside with her phone and a small water bottle. She jogged down the gravel path that bordered the guest area, seeing no posted "I keep thinking about Camille," the jogger. She unknowingly crossed into a wolf enclos, and moments later, movement broke the calm. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly things can change. She must have felt so disoriented. She slowed, confused by their presence, thinking the barrier must be nearby, having seen them safely behind fences before. But then they began advancing in a slow, deliberate arc, and the shift in their posture made her freeze. She turned, saw the empty stretch of gravel behind her, and started jogging back, faster this time. The wolves matched her pace, then accelerated, their paws thudding against the dirt. She broke into a sprint. The zookeeper, watching from above, saw Camille glance back once at the wolves. Near a drainage trench, her foot caught on the uneven gravel, and she fell forward, hitting hard. Before she could push herself up, the lead wolf clamped down on her right thigh, pulling backward with a violent jerk. She twisted, trying to kick free, but another wolf lunged at her shoulder. Her scream carried across the enclos, high and ragged. The zookeeper in the tower sounded the alarm and radioed the rangers. The response vehicle was rerouted around the inner fence lines, delaying arrival to just under 10 minutes. Within normal range for a keeper-initiated emergency call, 2 more wolves joined, surrounding her as she tried to crawl toward the ditch. The lead wolf released and re-gripped higher, its teeth sinking into her hip. She struck out with her hands, scraping the gravel, trying to push herself forward, but one of the animals bit into her arm, shaking until it tore free. Within moments, she was on her back, thrashing as the pack pulled from opposite sides. She kicked weakly once more, then went still. Rangers arrived within 10 minutes in a vehicle. They found the wolves clustered over Camille's body, heads low and jaws working. Warning shots sent the pack scattering into the trees. 2 rangers approached as another called for a tranquilizer team. Camille lay on her side, clothing torn, deep bites from shoulder to thigh. One ranger checked for a pulse and found none. They covered her with a thermal blanket and secured the area until all 5 wolves were sedated. An autopsy confirmed death by exsanguination, massive blood loss due to multiple deep lacerations, and crushing trauma to the limbs. The body was transported under escort to Versailles. That afternoon, Camille's family filed a civil lawsuit against the Thorizu Safari and its parent company, alleging gross negligence and breach of safety protocol. After a year of investigation and hearings, the court ruled in favor of the family. The park quietly settled without appeal. Following the incident, a criminal negligence inquiry and an independent enclos audit were conducted. Thorizu Safari implemented procedural retrofits, installing interlocks and alarms that trigger if any gate remains unlatched for more than 15 seconds. That afternoon, Ashley and Jacob paid the sanctuary's fee for a close encounter experience that promised visitors the chance to observe big cats during feeding demonstrations and educational presentations. The facility operated in a legal grey area, offering interactions that legitimate zoos and accredited sanctuaries would never permit. African lions are apex predators that retain all their wild instincts regardless of human contact or hand-rearing. Adult males can weigh up to 420 pounds and possess incredible strength, speed, and territorial behaviours that make them extremely dangerous in captivity. Lions are social animals with complex hierarchies, but they view humans as either threats to be eliminated or prey to be consumed. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, while their razor-sharp claws can inflict fatal wounds with a single swipe. I've seen the look in a lion's eyes just before an attack. It's a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable if you know what to look for. Millions of years of evolutionary programming kick in, turning a seemingly docile creature into a predator in an instant. It's a chilling reminder of the raw power that still exists in the animal kingdom, a power that can be unleashed with devastating speed. I remember reading about Ashley, who sought the ultimate photo at an exotic animal facility. She whispered her plan to her companion, Jake. While he distracted the sanctuary owner, she climbed over the barrier for a selfie with Caesar, a 400-pound African lion. The lion, initially calm, tracked her movements. But as she crouched down, phone in hand, his demeanor changed. His ears flattened, his tail twitched. Then, with explosive suddenness, Caesar attacked. The impact of his paws sent Ashley reeling. His claws tore into her. His jaws clamped onto her neck, those 4-inch canines puncturing through muscle and vertebrae. Jake's screams brought the owner running, but it was too late. Ashley's movements ceased within minutes. The facility, it turned out, had been operating without proper permits and insurance. Caesar was relocated, but Ashley was gone. Her death led to stricter regulations for exotic animal facilities, a small consolation for a life tragically lost. Then there's the story of Giovanni Russo in Grand Paradiso National Park, northern Italy. He was a certified alpine guide, a man who respected the balance between humans and wildlife. He and his wife, Eleanor, led trekking tours, specializing in remote routes with minimal disturbance. He often told clients that predators avoided people. One night, a pack of trail mix was left open near the fire pit. Scraps from dinner were tossed into the same area. Just before dawn, Eleanor woke to soft rustling and a faint growl. Wolves, normally nocturnal, were clustered around the fire pit. Giovanni grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. The beam caught 3 wolves standing over scattered wrappers and crumbs. He shouted and waved his light, but they didn't scatter. One stepped forward, hackles raised. Giovanni shouted again, clapping his hands, closing the distance. The older female lunged, nipping at his forearm. Then a younger one followed through, clamping down near his elbow, severing tissue. He fell backward, blood pulsing through his injuries. Elena tore from the tent with a burning stick from the fire pit. I've spent years studying how the wild world can turn on us in an instant. I remember reading one account that left me shaken for days. A woman named Genevieve Lawson, on a tour in Sundarbans National Park, stepped out of the boat for a photograph. She needed a closer shot, she said. She entered the water despite all warnings. I can see it now. It was July 15th, 2016, when the Lawson family arrived at the remote Sundarbans National Park in West Bengal, India. Before them stretched a vast mangrove delta, a maze of tidal channels and dense vegetation where the Ganges River meets the Bay of Bengal. Ancient mangrove trees rose from the brackish water, their aerial roots creating an impenetrable network. This UNESCO World Heritage Site harbored one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems, where saltwater crocodiles lurked beneath the surface and venomous snakes coiled in the canopy above. They can weigh up to 400 lb and mere over 10 feet in length, possessing 4 in K9 teeth capable of crushing windpipes and delivering fatal wounds within seconds. Their distinctive orange coat with black stripes provides perfect camouflage among the dappled shadows of the mangrove forest. During the afternoon tour, their boat approached a narrow channel where Ravi spotted fresh tiger tracks along the muddy shoreline. He immediately cut the engine and whispered for complete silence, explaining that a large male tiger had recently passed through the area. Despite his urgent warnings about remaining in the boat, Genevieve became frustrated with the distance and declared she needed closer photographs. Against all protests from her family and guide, Genevieve stepped over the safety barrier and lowered herself into the chest-deep channel water, camera held high above her head. Unbeknownst to the group, a massive 400 lb male Bengal tiger had been resting in the dense vegetation upstream, detecting their boat's engine minutes earlier. Sundarban's tigers are ambush predators that use water as their primary hunting medium, approaching prey with complete silence while swimming. This particular male had killed humans before and recognized the splashing sounds of vulnerable prey entering his territory. The tiger slipped into the water upstream and began swimming toward Genevieve with only its eyes and nose visible above the surface. When Genevieve reached the muddy shoreline and began photographing tiger tracks, she remained completely unaware of the approaching predator. The tiger closed the final 20 ft underwater, using its powerful limbs to propel itself through the murky channel with deadly precision. The attack erupted from the water with explosive violence. The massive tiger surfaced directly behind Genevieve and immediately clamped its powerful jaws around her throat from behind. The 4 in K9 teeth punctured through her neck muscles and crushed her windpipe with over 1,000 lb of bite force. The tiger's signature killing technique involved suffocating prey by crushing the throat, and the massive prez collapsed her airway instantly. Genevieve's body went rigid as the tiger's teeth severed major blood vessels in her neck, causing massive internal bleeding. The predator's powerful forelimbs wrapped around her torso, while its hind legs found purchase on her lower body, holding her in an inescapable grip. The tiger then began its drowning technique, pulling her backward into deeper water while maintaining its crew. The combination of crushed windpipe, severed arteries, and forced submersion. It's a chillingly efficient way to die. I can only imagine Genevieve's final moments as the tiger held her underwater in that mangrove maze. It was November 15th, 2016, in the remote forests of Primorsky Krai, eastern Russia. Snow fell, a steady veil that muted the usual sounds. Nikolai Baranov, 52, had spent most of his life in those forests. He was a forestry worker, managing patrols in the buffer zones near the Cody Allen Mountains. That week, he had been assigned to survey a hunting reserve following reports of wolves pushing closer to villages. He rode out before dawn on his snowmobile, a canvas bag packed with the essentials. Colleagues said he often preferred working solo. That day's assignment was simple. Document animal tracks after the first full snow. Wolves had been increasingly active, driven from higher ground after a collapse in wild boar numbers. I read that wolves here could travel up to 20 miles in a single night, driven by hunger across frozen ground and sparse woodland. Locals warned of animals following sled trails at dusk. Nikolai heard the same warnings at the station that morning, but didn't take them seriously. By noon, the weather had shifted fast, gusting snow and dropping visibility. His supervisor made several radio attempts that went unanswered. When evening came and Nikolai still hadn't returned, Yevgin, a neighboring ranger and longtime friend, prepared to follow his route before dark. Tracks were faint but visible, a single snowmobile line winding north, then stopping abruptly about 800 meters from the ridge. Around the site, another pattern emerged, paw marks deep and overlapping, circling. The snow bore drag lines. Then the circle tightened. From that point, the scene unfolded through what Yevgeny later described as a sequence of struggle. Human footprints turned erratic, moving backward. A smear of blood marked the snowmobile's side panel. The wolves had likely approached silently, using the cover of snowfall and wind. Initial bites were to the legs, pulling him down. Blood spray against nearby birch bark indicated arterial injury within seconds. His jacket was shredded along the spine, showing where one animal had clamped onto his back, while another tore at the neck. Ivani found the body 30 meters downhill near a frozen stream. The snow around it was flattened and red. The wolves had likely fed briefly before retreating. Later investigations showed that the surrounding prints showed at least 4 individuals, 2 larger adults, 2 smaller juveniles. Autopsy confirmed catastrophic blood loss, with multiple punctures to major vessels and crushing trauma to the neck vertebrae consistent with a fatal bite. The official report listed predatory behavior exacerbated by winter scarcity. Specialists noted that 2016 saw an unusual decline in prey density across the region. The incident received a single mention on regional news, framed as a tragic encounter during severe weather. It was June 14, 2015, and the Sunset Lake subdivision in suburban Tampa, Florida, was settling into another warm summer evening. There are creatures out there that have remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. Perfectly adapted apex predators. That thought alone is enough to keep me awake some nights. I once read about a man named Walt, who learned this lesson in the most brutal way imaginable. He'd moved to Florida from Ohio, seeking year-round golf and the outdoor life he'd missed during those harsh winters. He bought a modest ranch home with water access, a private dock where he could fish and feed the ducks that became regular visitors. His evening routine involved sitting on his patio, watching the sunset reflect off the water, tossing breadcrumbs to the waterfowl. The Sunset Lakes community had been built on reclaimed wetlands, with retention ponds and canals managing stormwater and providing attractive water features. These waterways connected to natural creek systems that flowed into Tampa Bay, allowing wildlife to move freely. Recent heavy rains had raised water levels, increasing wildlife activity in residential areas. Walt had noticed more alligators, but he'd learned to coexist with them. His regular duck feeding, though, had created a reliable food source, attracting waterfowl from throughout the area. American alligators, these apex predators, are perfectly adapted ambush hunters. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 lbs, with jaw muscles capable of exerting over 3,000 lbs of pres per square inch. They're opportunistic feeders, consuming birds, fish, mammals, and occasionally humans who venture too close. It was September 8th, 2014, and the vast wetlands of the Florida Everglades stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun, teeming with wildlife. Not far away, near Tamiami Trail, airboat tours buzzed through the waterways, carrying tourists deep into alligator territory. On one of those tours was Michael Chen, a 35-year-old software engineer from Seattle, on his first visit to Florida. He had always been fascinated by technology and outdoor adventure, spending his weekends hiking in the Pacific Northwest. His engineering background had given him confidence in analyzing risks, but his experience with dangerous wildlife was limited. He'd grown up in urban Seattle, developing his love of nature through weekend camping trips. His methodical approach had made him successful, but perhaps too confident in his ability to assess danger. Michael enjoyed taking photos of his travels. That afternoon, he'd joined a small group airboat tour that promised close encounters with alligators. The tour guide, weathered and experienced, had repeatedly warned passengers to remain seated and keep their hands inside the boat at all times. Alligators, those apex predators, have remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. I'll never forget reading about alligators, how adult males, perfectly adapted for ambush hunting in water, can reach 14 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. And the press their jaws can exert, over 3,000 pounds per square inch. They can launch themselves out of the water with explosive force. Anything moving near their territory is either food or a threat. I remember one particular incident, an airboat tour moving smoothly for almost an hour, when the guide pointed out a huge alligator basking on a mudbank only 20 feet away. The reptile was immense, easily 12 feet long and 800 pounds. It lay there, prehistoric and still in the afternoon heat. A tourist named Michael started taking photos, excited to show his colleagues back in Seattle such an impressive wild animal. But his excitement overcame his caution. He leaned farther and farther over the boat's edge to get better shots. Then the unthinkable happened. Michael's phone slipped from his hand, falling toward the dark water. Without thinking, he lunged, reaching desperately to catch his expensive device before it vanished into the swamp. The alligator, which had been patiently watching the boat, saw Michael's sudden movement and attacked instantly. The 800-pound reptile exploded from the mudbank with terrifying speed. Its powerful tail propelled it through the water like a missile, aimed right at Michael. The alligator's massive jaws clamped down on Michael's outstretched arm with bone-crushing force. 3,000 pounds of bite press shattered bones and severed arteries in an instant. Michael screamed, his shock and pain echoing across the swamp as the reptile's momentum pulled him over the side of the airboat and into the murky water. The tour guide and other passengers desperately grabbed Michael's legs, trying to pull him back into the boat. But the alligator held its grip. It began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly while maintaining its hold on Michael's arm. Michael's struggles weakened as blood loss, crushing injuries, and drowning overwhelmed him. The alligator never loosened its grip as it continued the death roll with mechanical precision, each rotation causing more trauma, ensuring its prey couldn't escape. Within minutes, Michael's movements stopped as the alligator's brutal assault proved fatal. The massive reptile dragged his body into deeper water, disappearing beneath the surface with its kill. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but Michael's body wasn't recovered until the next day, when wildlife officials located the alligator and retrieved his remains. The tour company immediately put up barriers around passenger seating areas and enhanced safety briefings. Michael's death led his family to push for stricter safety regulations in the wildlife tourism industry. The incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignoring safety warnings around apex predators and prioritizing photography over personal safety. It was July 8th, 2017. The Detroit summer heat shimmered off abandoned lots as Maria Santos loaded her car with dog food and water. At 28, she'd spent 5 years walking dogs by day and feeding Detroit's feral population by night. Recently laid off, she was spending more time in dangerous neighborhoods, trying to help animals most people considered beyond saving. The economic collapse had hit Detroit hard, leaving entire neighborhoods abandoned and creating perfect breeding grounds for packs of wild dogs. These weren't lost pets. They were second and third generation feral animals, never knowing human kindness, surviving by scavenging and defending territory with savage efficiency. Maria's regular route took her through 6 abandoned lots, each home to a different pack. She knew their hierarchies, feeding schedules, and individual personalities. But the newest group concerned her the most. 6 dogs led by a large German Shepherd mix she'd nicknamed Alpha, including several animals she didn't recognize. This pack was hungrier, more aggressive, and less predictable than the others. But Maria's compassion overruled her caution. These animals needed help, and she was the only one willing to provide it. As twilight settled over the abandoned neighborhood, Maria parked near the lot where Alpha's pack had made their home. The area was a wasteland of broken concrete and waist-high weeds, perfect cover for animals that had learned to hunt and hide. Maria had been feeding this pack for 3 weeks, always maintaining a safe distance. But tonight felt different. The dogs seemed more agitated, their movements more coordinated, their attention more focused on her than the food. What she didn't realize was that pack dynamics had shifted with the addition of 3 new dogs, animals that saw humans not as providers, but as competitors. Alpha emerged from the shadows first, his 80-pound frame moving with predatory grace. Behind him came the others, a scarred pit bull mix, 2 smaller dogs, and 3 newcomers whose breeds were impossible to determine. Their eyes reflected the dim streetlight like mirrors. Maria began distributing food as always, tossing handfuls of kibble in different directions to prevent fighting. But tonight, the strategy backfired. Instead of dispersing to eat, the dogs began to see. I've seen what happens when pack instincts take over, when the line between familiar caregiver and something else vanishes. There was a woman named Maria in an abandoned neighborhood who made the mistake of stepping between fighting dogs. She thought she was helping, but they saw her as competition. It was Alpha, the leader, who attacked first. 80 pounds of muscle slamming into her chest. Then the others joined in, their pack mentality erasing any memory of kindness. They dragged her deeper into the lot, away from any chance of rescue. Their attacks spoke of generations of predatory instinct, honed by urban survival. These weren't pets gone bad. They were wild animals who saw humans as either threats or prey. By the time they backed away, Maria was gone. It took 3 days to capture them all. They were euthanized, their wildness deemed impossible to tame. That story stayed with me for a long time. And then I read about Kendra Sullivan. September 8th, 2015. Kendra arrived at the Ngamba Island Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Uganda, a 100-acre forested island on Lake Victoria. It was a refuge for orphaned and rescued chimpanzees, a place where they could live in semi-natural social groups. Kendra, a wildlife photographer, was there to document their rehabilitation. She was known for getting close, for capturing intimate portraits. She'd worked with horses, cattle, even aggressive bulls, and she believed she had an innate understanding of animal behavior. Dr. James Mukasa, the sanctuary director, grew concerned. Kendra dismissed his safety briefings, demanding access to restricted areas. Peter Sally, a caretaker, warned her about the unpredictable nature of the chimpanzees, but she brushed off his concerns as superstition. There were 49 chimpanzees at the sanctuary, many traumatized by poaching or the illegal pet trade. Despite their rehabilitation, they were still wild animals, with all the instincts and physical capabilities that came with it. And chimpanzees are incredibly powerful. Adult males can weigh up to 150 pounds, stand over 4 feet tall, with the muscle to exert tremendous force. Their grip strength can exceed 1,300 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bones. And then there are the canine teeth, over 2 inches long, designed for defense and dominance. During the tour, Kendra became frustrated with the viewing restrictions. She wanted access to the maintenance areas, where staff entered the enclose. Dr. Mukasa refused, explaining the extreme danger of direct contact. But while the group was observing the chimpanzees, Kendra noticed an unlocked gate leading to a maintenance corridor. Despite the warnings, she slipped away, believing her experience with domestic animals had prepared her for anything. The maintenance area put her within reach of Boso, the sanctuary's dominant male. He was a 150-pound adult, rescued as an infant 15 years earlier. Boso had shown aggression toward unfamiliar humans and was considered one of the most dangerous animals in the facility. He was resting near the barrier when he sensed Kendra's presence. Chimpanzees are territorial and see unfamiliar humans as threats. Boso became agitated by her intrusion. When she raised her camera to photograph him, he interpreted it as a challenge. His response was immediate. He lunged forward and grabbed Kendra's extended arm with crushing force. I've read a lot about animal attacks, trying to understand the hidden logic behind them. I remember reading about a chimpanzee named Boso, and the chilling details have stayed with me. Boso's canine teeth were over 2 inches long, razor sharp, and he used them with terrifying precision. He attacked a woman named Kendra, pulling her against a barrier with such force that it fractured the bones in her forearm. Chimpanzees, I learned, instinctively target faces, hands, and genitals to inflict maximum damage during aggressive encounters. His powerful hands ripped at her clothing, his feet kicked violently, and his jaws crushed facial bones, tearing away large sections of skin and muscle. Major blood vessels in her neck were severed. The attack lasted nearly 2 minutes. Another man, Peter Sully, used high-press water hoses to drive Bosso away, but it was too late. Kendra died from blood loss and trauma. The investigation that followed focused on security failures. Meanwhile, far away in Saskatchewan, on February 9th, 2014, the morning light filtered through the northern boreal forest, and 2 men were setting out on what seemed like a routine trip. David Lasky, a 45-year-old part-time wildlife photographer, was heading into the woods with his cousin Jeff. David had spent years tracking animal behavior, learning to move silently and read patterns in the snow. Weekends were for the woods. His cousin Jeff, 42, often joined him. They'd grown up hunting and fishing together. This weekend, after a light snowfall, David wanted to check a set of cameras he'd left by a frozen creek north of Waskew Lake. They'd heard distant howls before, but never close. The plan was simple: a 2-hour ride by snowmobile, a short hike to the cameras, and back before dusk. The wolves in that region were typically grey, thick-coated animals, averaging about 90 pounds. They moved in tight family groups, relying on coordination and patience. Under normal conditions, they avoided people entirely. Dressed in insulated gear and carrying only a single red flare for safety, they parked their snowmobile near the creek around 9:30 a.m. and began walking the last half-mile through packed snow. At first, everything was normal. They reached the first camera, brushed off the lens, and swapped the SD card. Around 10:15, as they crossed the creek, Jeff's boot slipped on a patch of ice. David crouched to help him up. That's when they both noticed faint movement among the tree line across the creek. The animals stood still at first, only their eyes catching the light. Jeff straightened and waved his arms, shouting to scare them off. But the wolves didn't run. Unbeknownst to the men, a freshly killed deer lay half buried in snow about 20 yards behind the tree line. The pack was food-stressed, defending their kill rather than hunting. They began to fan out slowly, forming a loose semicircle. David muttered that they were just curious. But even as he spoke, one of the wolves lowered its head and started advancing. The men began backing up the slope toward their snowmobile, moving quickly, but without turning. The wolves followed, quiet and steady. Then the first lunge came. A grey blur across the ice, jaws clamping onto the back of David's leg. The impact drove him face first into the snow. Jeff spun and reached for the flare, but his gloves fumbled with the cap. 2 more wolves broke from the trees, bounding fast. David tried to kick free, leaving streaks of blood against the snow. He managed to roll onto his back and swing an arm, hitting one wolf across the muzzle with his camera bag, but another struck from the side, teeth finding his shoulder. Jeff finally snapped the flare to life, the red flame hissing. He swung it toward the animals. One wolf snarled and darted back, fur singed along its flank, but the others held ground. David was on his knees now, one hand pressed to his thigh, blood pumping dark and fast through his fingers. He tried to rise, but his leg gave out beneath him. Jeff charged forward with the flare, yelling, waving it more aggressively. The heat drove them back momentarily, circling just out of reach. David slumped sideways. I've spent years studying how animals, even predators, usually avoid humans. That's why some cases stay with me. Cases where the animal's behavior seems to defy all logic. Sometimes the line between defense and predation blurs with tragic consequences. In one such case, after Jeff swung the burning flare, the wolves retreated into the trees. He pressed on his cousin David's wound, but it was too deep. Within a minute, David was gone. Jeff, in shock, managed to use David's camera bag as a makeshift pillow. He pulled out his phone and called for help. Reception was spotty, but a faint, intermittent signal reached a nearby ranger station. Authorities arrived by snowmobile about 40 minutes later. They found Jeff sitting beside the body, shaking uncontrollably. Wolf tracks surrounded the site in a broad ring, with drag marks leading back toward the tree line and the cached deer carcass. The official report listed the cause of death as exsanguination from femoral artery trauma, consistent with large animal bites. Provincial conservation officers, assisted by federal wildlife agents, closed the area within the hour. Samples were taken from bite margins for DNA analysis, and the implicated pack was later trapped and relocated to a remote management zone north of Reindeer Lake. Wildlife biologists suggested the wolves had been defending a food cache, not actively hunting, but the distinction mattered little to those who saw the aftermath. Then, on December 9, 2018, in the hillside community of Canyon Vista in suburban Los Angeles, something else happened on an unusually warm winter evening. This residential development, built where urban sprawl met the wild chaparral of the Santa Monica Mountains, featured homes perched on steep slopes with spectacular views of the city below. Kevin Chen, a 16-year-old high school junior and varsity basketball player, was running late after practice and decided to take his usual shortcut through an undeveloped lot, rather than follow the longer route along the main road. Kevin was an honor student and star athlete who balanced academic excellence with athletic achievement, earning recognition as one of his school's most promising college prospects. He lived with his parents and younger sister in a modern home that backed up against the natural open space that made Canyon Vista such a desirable address. Kevin often used the informal trails and vacant lots to move quickly between his home and school, a practice that had never caused any problems during his 4 years in the neighborhood. The Canyon Vista area had been experiencing increased wildlife activity following a series of devastating wildfires that had burned thousands of acres in the surrounding mountains. The fires had displaced numerous predators, forcing them to seek new territory and food sources in areas they had previously avoided. Local authorities had issued warnings about mountain lion sightings in residential areas, but most residents viewed these as routine precautions rather than serious threats. Kevin was aware of the wildlife warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during his frequent use of the neighborhood's informal trail system. He carried his basketball gear in a backpack and typically moved quickly through the undeveloped areas, confident that his familiarity with the terrain and his athletic ability would keep him safe from any potential threats. Mountain lions are solitary predators that require large territories to support their hunting needs, with adult males controlling ranges of up to 100 square miles. Juvenile males are particularly dangerous as they establish new territories, often displaying more aggressive behavior than experienced adults. These young cats are less skilled at hunting natural prey and may target easier victims, including domestic animals and occasionally humans. Mountain lions are capable of incredible stealth and can stalk prey for extended periods before launching surprise attacks from close range. As Kevin jogged through the overgrown vacant lot, he was unaware that an 80 lb juvenile male mountain lion had been using the area as a hunting ground for domestic cats and small dogs that wandered from nearby homes. The young cat had been displaced from his natal territory by an older, more dominant male, and was desperately seeking to establish new hunting grounds that could support his survival. The mountain lion had been stalking Kevin for several hundred yards, moving silently through the dense brush while staying downwind to avoid detection. The cat's hunting instincts were triggered by Kevin's size, movement pattern, and the fact that he was alone and vulnerable in the predator's newly claimed territory. The attack came from behind as Kevin navigated through a particularly dense section of chaparral. The 80 lb mountain lion launched himself from the brush with explosive force, his powerful hind legs propelling him through the air to land squarely on Kevin's back. The impact drove Kevin face first into the rocky ground, while the cat's claws found purchase in his shoulders and back. The mountain lion's jaws clamped down on the back of Kevin's neck, his 4 canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae, while his bite force targeted the spinal cord. Kevin's attempts to fight back with his backpack proved futile against the cat's superior strength and positioning. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Kevin's shoulders and torso, each swipe opening deep gashes that caused massive blood loss. Kevin's screams for help echoed through the hillside community, alerting residents in nearby homes to the emergency unfolding in the vacant lot. Several homeowners called 911 while attempting to locate the source of the disturbance. But the dense vegetation made it difficult to pinpoint Kevin's exact location. The mountain lion continued his attack for several minutes, driven by predatory instincts and the stress of establishing new territory. That day, Brandon paid a hefty fee for a private photo session with Sasha, a 300-pound female Bengal tiger raised by hand from a cub. The ranch owner, a former circus trainer, supervised, emphasizing the extreme dangers involved. Bengal tigers are formidable predators, with adult females weighing up to 350 pounds, possessing incredible strength, speed, and hunting instincts. They're solitary, territorial creatures that can become aggressive when their space is violated. Their jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, and their claws can grow up to 4 inches long. The session began safely enough, with Brandon posing outside Sasha's enclos, but he soon grew frustrated with the distance, wanting closer contact for more dramatic photos. He convinced the owner to let him into a smaller holding area adjacent to Sasha's main enclos, arguing his fitness, and confident energy would keep the tiger calm. Against his better judgment, the owner agreed. The holding area was separated from Sasha's territory by only a chain link barrier, putting Brandon within arm's reach. He began posing, his camera on a tripod set to automatic. Then he made his fatal mistake, crouching down next to the barrier and extending his hand towards Sasha, believing his confidence would demonstrate dominance. The tiger's ears flattened, and her tail began to twitch. I've seen the aftermath of so many preventable tragedies. The story of Brandon, the fitness model, is one that sticks with me. He died from massive trauma and blood loss after being attacked by a captive tiger during a photo shoot. Emergency responders arrived within 20 minutes, but it was too late. The investigation revealed the ranch operating without permits and insurance, violating state regulations. Sasha, the tiger, was moved to a proper sanctuary. Brandon's death rippled through the fitness world, highlighting the dangers of using wild animals as props. His family, understandably, filed lawsuits. Then there's Tommy Rodriguez, August 19, 2013. The Missouri heat, the stench of neglect. It all permeated his illegal breeding operation. For over a decade, at 45 years old, Tommy had been running puppy mills. But financial press forced him to cut corners, fatally so. His 20-acre property was a maze of kennels, housing nearly 80 dogs in various states of neglect. He specialized in popular breeds, selling them for high prices to unsuspecting buyers. But the real money, I learned, came from the security. 4 massive dogs patrolled the perimeter, 2 cane corsos, over 120 pounds each, and 2 mastiff mixes, nearly 140 pounds. They weren't pets. They were weapons, acquired from a defunct fighting operation and trained to be aggressive. The financial press had been building for months. Veterinary bills, feed costs, maintenance. It all ate into his profits. Increased scrutiny from animal welfare organizations forced him to be more careful, but he cut back on everything: food, medical care, even basic maintenance. The guard dogs, once fed premium meat, were reduced to scraps and cheap kibble. A hungry guard dog, I know, is exponentially more dangerous. Hunger sharpens their instincts, makes them territorial, reduces their tolerance. The 4 animals, once content to patrol, now viewed everything, including Tommy, as competition. The dogs had been showing signs of increased aggression for weeks, fighting over food, marking territory, showing less deference to Tommy's commands. A smart operator would have recognized the warning signs, but Tommy was desperate, distracted, overconfident. On that sweltering August night, Tommy made his final rounds, checking on breeding females and security systems. It was past midnight, the Missouri countryside silent except for distant barking and inadequate ventilation fans. He carried a flashlight and a metal rod, but his attention was on financial calculations, not the danger lurking in the shadows. The guard dogs had been without food for 3 days. Not by design, but because Tommy had been too busy with a sick litter. Their hunger had reached a critical point. Survival instincts overrode years of conditioning. They were no longer guard dogs, but predators looking for their next meal. Tommy's mistake was approaching the area where he kept the guard dogs without proper precautions. Normally, he would have fed them first. but stress and exhaustion made him careless, and he walked directly into their domain with only a flashlight and false confidence. The attack began when Brutus, the larger cane corso, emerged from the shadows. His 125-pound frame moved silently, his head lowered in a hunting posture that Tommy should have recognized. Behind him came the others: Titan, the second cane corso, Rex, a 140-pound mastiff mix, and Scar, whose scarred muzzle told a story of fighting. Tommy realized the danger too late. As he turned to retreat, Brutus launched himself forward, his jaws clamping down on Tommy's left eye with crushing force. The impact drove Tommy to the ground, his flashlight spinning away into darkness as he screamed. The other 3 dogs joined the attack within seconds, their pack instincts engaged. Rex grabbed Tommy's right arm, his jaws crushing bone. Titan went for the torso, his teeth tearing through clothing and flesh. Scar circled, darting in to bite. Tommy's screams echoed across the empty countryside, but his nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away. The dogs worked with the coordination of experienced predators, disabling their prey rather than killing quickly. They had learned patience, and hunger made them methodical. The assault continued for nearly 20 minutes. The dogs took turns feeding on Tommy while he was still alive. His struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock took their toll. But the animals showed no mercy. They had been conditioned to view violence as normal, hunger as constant, and humans as either threats or food sources. I find myself thinking about Tommy, the man whose story ended in such a gruesome way. His body lay broken, consumed by the very animals he sought to control. The guard dogs, their hunger sated for the moment, retreated, their aggressive nature unchanged. It was a macabre scene, one that remained undiscovered for weeks as the dogs continued to feed. The rest of his operation crumbled. The other dogs, trapped in their kennels, starved. The stench of death, it was that which eventually drew the authorities, investigating reports of animal cruelty. What the sheriff's deputies found was a scene of unimaginable horror. Tommy's remains scattered, dozens of dead and dying dogs filling the kennels. The 4 guard dogs, deemed too aggressive, were shot on sight. The investigation revealed the full extent of Tommy's cruelty. Breeding females kept in deplorable conditions, puppies dying from neglect, and financial records showing he'd been selling sick animals across state lines. The surviving dogs, too far gone, were euthanized. Tommy's death marked the end of one of Missouri's largest illegal puppy mills. But the cost extended far beyond his own life. The animals he exploited for profit ultimately became his executioners, their hunger and desperation turning them into the monsters he tried to create. Then there was the case of Roberto Mendez. It was August 22nd, 2014. A sweltering summer afternoon in Cypress Point, Florida. This exclusive community, built on reclaimed wetlands, was the pinnacle of luxury living. Roberto, a landscaper, was working alone, maintaining the pristine grounds. He'd built his business from nothing, a testament to his hard work and dedication. He supported his wife and 2 young children, often working long hours in the Florida heat. Cypress Point, with its artificial lakes and water features, was connected to the natural waterways. Roberto was familiar with Florida's wildlife, respectful of the dangers they posed. On this particular afternoon, he was trimming bushes around an ornamental pond when his hedge trimmer slipped and fell into the water. I've always been fascinated, and perhaps a little unnerved, by alligators. They are perfectly camouflaged ambush predators, capable of remaining motionless for hours. Adult females can reach impressive sizes, possessing incredible speed and power. They are most dangerous when protecting their nests or when surprised. Their bite force is astounding, and their death roll technique is terrifyingly efficient. Roberto waded into the pond to retrieve his trimmer, assuming the manicured water was safe. He had worked around similar features countless times without incident. But the attack came the moment his feet touched the muddy bottom. A 10-foot female alligator exploded from the vegetation, her jaws clamping down on Roberto's leg. And from the moment she arrived, she began making unreasonable demands. Known for her entitled attitude, and this almost childlike belief that money could buy her anything, she'd already berated Captain Steve Morrison and marine biologist Dr. Lisa Chen multiple times during the morning briefing. Her boyfriend, Brad Mitchell, watched uncomfortably as Tara screamed at the crew for what she called their pathetic safety restrictions. Captain Morrison, with 18 years of experience operating in these dangerous waters, had dealt with difficult clients before. But Tara's aggressive behavior and complete lack of empathy alarmed him. She repeatedly demanded that the protective cage be removed entirely, claiming she had paid premium prices and deserved unrestricted access to the sharks. When Dr. Lisa Chen attempted to explain the life-threatening dangers, Tara dismissed her as an incompetent employee who was clearly jealous of successful people. Tara had somehow convinced herself that her graduate student status and expensive booking fee entitled her to special treatment. She threatened to destroy the company's reputation online and file lawsuits if the crew didn't provide her with the extreme experience she demanded. Her complete disregard for safety became chillingly evident when she suggested that crew members should enter the water first to test whether the sharks were dangerous. The crew had successfully attracted multiple great white sharks using a carefully prepared chum mixture. Among the responding predators was a massive 18-foot female, estimated to weigh over 4,000 pounds. She was feeding aggressively on the bait. The enormous shark displayed classic hunting behaviors, circling the boat with calculated precision, while investigating the steel diving cage. Before entering the water, Tara secretly loosened the connections on her diving regulator, planning to create a fake equipment malfunction that would justify exiting the protective cage. She believed she was clever enough to manipulate the situation to get the unrestricted shark access she felt entitled to. Once submerged in the protective cage, Tara immediately began signaling fake distress to the surface crew, pointing frantically at her sabotaged regulator. Captain Morrison initiated emergency procedures to bring her to the surface. But instead of ascending, Tara swam away from the cage toward the feeding sharks, believing, perhaps until the very last second, that her superior intelligence made her invulnerable. Her erratic swimming movements created the exact type of distressed prey behavior that triggers great white hunting instincts. The massive female great white detected Tara's panicked swimming immediately and abandoned the chum bait to investigate this new potential prey. The enormous predator approached from below at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. The shark's assault was swift and devastating. Rising from the depths like a living torpedo, the great white struck Tara from below with tremendous force, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of gleaming, serrated teeth. The impact drove Tara upward as the shark's jaws clamped down around her torso with bone-crushing press. The razor-sharp teeth sliced through her wetsuit and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite force of 4,000 pounds per square inch shattered Tara's rib cage instantly, puncturing both lungs and severing major blood vessels throughout her torso. The shark's powerful jaw muscles continued applying press, while its head thrashed violently from side to side, the signature feeding behavior that allows great whites to tear away large chunks of flesh. The violent shaking motion severed Tara's body at the waist, separating her upper and lower torso. I've seen firsthand how quickly things can go wrong when humans forget their place in the natural world. I remember one case in particular, a stark reminder that money and confidence cannot override the instincts of a predator. A woman named Tara believed she could demand safety while shark cage diving, even after sabotaging her own equipment. She paid the ultimate price. The investigation revealed her deliberate actions, and while stricter regulations were implemented, it was too late for Tara. What struck me most was the family's subsequent lawsuit, mirroring the same sense of entitlement that had led to her death. Another case that comes to mind. It was March 22nd, 2015, in Alabama. The sun beat down on Harold Thompson's property, where the barking of dogs echoed from kennels scattered across 5 acres of red dirt. At 71, Hank, as everyone called him, moved slowly between the enclos. He carried water with the confidence that came from 20 years of dog breeding. He and his wife, Martha, had built their operation from nothing, specializing in Rottweilers and German Shepherds. What had started as a hobby had grown into a modest business, with 8 breeding females and 3 males producing litters they sold across the southeast. But age, it seemed, had made Hank careless about safety protocols. In his younger days, he never would have entered a kennel alone, especially with breeding males during territorial phases. He'd seen what these dogs could do, the power in their jaws, the speed of their attacks. But experience had bred overconfidence. The centerpiece of their operation was Brutus, a 130-pound Rottweiler whose massive frame made him their most sought-after stud. At 4 years old, he was in his prime, with a bloodline tracing back to German working dogs. His offspring commanded premium prices from buyers seeking protection animals. Recently, though, Brutus had been showing increased aggression. A minor injury to his left rear leg had left him limping and irritable, causing him to snap at Martha when she tried to examine the wound. The veterinarian had prescribed pain medication, but the dog's temperament had grown increasingly unpredictable. Martha had expressed concerns about Hank working alone with Brutus, especially given the dog's recent mood changes. But Hank dismissed her worries with stubborn confidence. He'd raised Brutus from a puppy and believed their bond was unbreakable. On that March afternoon, Martha had driven into town for supplies, leaving Hank alone with the dogs. The kennels needed cleaning. Water bowls required filling. Work Hank had done thousands of times before. Brutus watched from his kennel as Hank approached, the dog's dark eyes tracking every movement with an intensity that should have served as a warning. The animal was panting heavily despite the shade, his injured leg causing him to shift uncomfortably. Pain has a way of making even docile animals unpredictable, and Brutus was far from docile. Hank unlocked the kennel gate and stepped inside, bucket in hand, his attention focused on the dirty water bowl in the corner. He'd performed this routine hundreds of times, but today, Brutus was different. The dog's ears were pinned back, his tail held low, his massive body coiled with tension. As Hank bent down to clean the water bowl, his back turned to the dog. Brutus made his decision. There was no growling, no warning, just 130 pounds of muscle launching through the air with devastating force. The impact drove Hank face first into the concrete floor, his bucket clattering away as Brutus's jaws found their target. The dog's teeth sank deep into Hank's throat, crushing his windpipe and severing major blood vessels in a single, catastrophic bite. Hank's hands clawed desperately at the animal's massive head, but Brutus had locked on with predatory determination. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone with mechanical efficiency. Hank's screams were cut short by the damage to his throat, replaced by a wet, gurgling sound that grew weaker by the second. Blood pooled beneath his body as Brutus continued his attack, driven by instincts bred into his lineage for generations. The assault lasted less than 3 minutes, but the damage was irreversible. When Brutus finally released his grip, Hank lay motionless on the kennel floor, his life ebbing away in the Alabama heat. Martha returned home 2 hours later to find the property strangely quiet. She called out for Hank as she walked toward the kennels, but received no response. When she rounded the corner and saw Brutus standing guard over her husband's body, the full horror became clear. The dog's reaction to Martha's presence was immediate and threatening. He positioned himself between her and Hank's body, his lips pulled back in a snarl. Martha backed away slowly, dialing 911 from her truck. Sheriff's deputies arrived within 20 minutes, but Brutus refused to allow anyone near Hank's body. After consulting with animal control, the decision was made to shoot Brutus rather than risk additional casualties. The massive Rottweiler died with 3 bullets in his chest. The investigation concluded that Hank's death was a tragic accident caused by his failure to recognize warning signs of an aggressive, injured animal. The breeding operation was shut down, the remaining dogs relocated, and Martha was left to grieve both her husband and the animal that had been part of their family. Then there was September 3rd, 2013, near the Toklat River in Denali National Park, Alaska. By early afternoon, the wind had dropped and the landscape stood still, open and silent. From a distance, it looked calm, a place where nothing could happen quickly. But the quiet there was deceptive. Sarah Miller, 26, was an experienced backpacker from Anchorage. She was known for her... The last photograph on her recovered camera was taken just 6 minutes before her estimated time of death. In that picture, I can see a small group of wolves following a caribou herd in the mid-distance. It's a haunting image, capturing a moment of serene wilderness just before everything went tragically wrong. Sarah, the hiker, had planned a 2-day loop near the Tlat River, hoping to witness the caribou migration and perhaps even spot some wolves trailing the herds. She was experienced, well prepared, carrying bear spray, a GPS beacon, and enough food for a couple of nights. Solo travel didn't scare her. She'd been doing it for years, often documenting her adventures for small hiking blogs. The Denali backcountry zones required permits, which she had properly filed. Rangers recalled she'd inquired about late-season wolf movements, but didn't seem concerned when told sightings had increased near the river. Wolves were following caribou herds migrating south, and fresh tracks had been spotted just days earlier. To Sarah, it was all just part of the environment, something to respect, not fear. Wolves in that region averaged between 70 and 100 pounds. They were built for endurance and speed, capable of covering 40 miles in a day. Their jaws delivered a bite force of nearly 400 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone. They rarely approached people, living mostly on caribou, hares, and ground squirrels. But when prey grew scarce, or human scent carried traces of food, curiosity sometimes lingered. That week, rangers had posted advisories near trailheads, noting that several hikers had reported wolves trailing them at a distance. Sarah likely saw those postings when she signed out, though there's no record she changed her route. Her confidence in her precautions was understandable. Statistically, Denali's wolves avoided confrontation. Around 4 p.m., a tourist group driving on the park road spotted a lone figure standing on a gravel bar below the ridge. The hiker waved. It was later confirmed to be Sarah, based on her clothing and the timing. She was heading upstream toward her campsite. She reached her final GPS coordinate sometime before 4:45 p.m. Tracks found later indicated she moved off the main gravel bar toward higher ground, probably planning to cut inland. The first sign of struggle began about half a mile from her tent. Her GPS unit recorded erratic movement, rapid looping, then a sudden stop. Investigators pieced together what happened next through physical evidence and predator behavior analysis. The wolves had diverted toward her position once the herd passed out of sight. Sarah likely saw them coming from a distance. She deployed her bear spray once. Residue was detected on nearby vegetation. Wind readings that afternoon showed a westward shift, causing partial blowback of the spray mist. It worked briefly, driving the wolves back about 20 feet before the cloud dispersed. They began to circle again, emboldened by the fading chemical scent. One flank of the group approached from behind, following her retreat up a shallow embankment. Handprints pressed deep into the soil showed she climbed in haste. Blood marks began at the top of the slope. One wolf likely lunged first, grabbing her backpack or arm. The straps were torn clean through, consistent with a pulling force rather than a cut. A second wolf joined, aiming lower, its bite breaking the skin along her thigh. She tried to fight back. The spray canister lay spent beside her pack, but the group coordinated, one attacking from the rear, the others darting forward. The ground at the site was churned with soil and hair, suggesting several minutes of movement before she was forced down. Analysis of tissue marks later revealed crushing bites to the neck and shoulder, consistent with a killing grip, the kind wolves use to suffocate large prey. Her jacket was shredded, and the torn sleeve, recovered 20 feet away, still held fragments of skin and fabric. Search efforts began that night, with both ground crews and a helicopter dispatched after rangers noticed her vehicle unmoved. The aircraft spotted a disturbed patch of gravel near the Tlat Channel the next morning. Sarah's body lay partially covered by soil and debris, her left arm missing, likely carried off by scavengers after the attack. The park temporarily closed multiple backcountry zones along the migration corridor. Genetic sampling confirmed the wolves belonged to the Talat pack. Investigators determined the attack began as a predatory test or prey proxy response that escalated fatally. But with no repeated approach or food-seeking behavior observed, no removals were ordered. At a private debrief, rangers explained the findings to Sarah's parents, who later issued a short statement urging that the park not punish what it protects. It was April 14th, 2018, when Monica Barrett arrived at Everglades National Park in Florida, one of the largest tropical wilderness areas in the United States. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched across 1.5 million acres of sawgrass marshes and shallow waterways that served as home to some of North America's most dangerous predators. The park's intricate network of channels created the perfect habitat for massive American alligators. Monica Barrett, a 44-year-old divorce attorney from Miami, had booked a solo kayak tour to clear her head after a difficult custody case. Known for her aggressive courtroom tactics and confrontational personality, she had built her legal career on intimidating opponents and refusing to back down from any challenge. Her reputation for getting her way through sheer force of will had created a dangerous sense of entitlement. Tommy Rodriguez, a 52-year-old tour guide with over 20 years of experience, had immediately recognized Monica as a problematic client during the morning safety briefing. She had interrupted his presentation. "I've always found it unsettling how easily we underestimate the power of nature, especially when our own sense of entitlement gets in the way." I remember reading about a woman named Monica who, despite repeated warnings, decided she knew better than the park rangers and experienced guides in a Florida park. She believed her legal background somehow made her immune to the dangers lurking in those waterways. Her story is a stark reminder that nature doesn't negotiate. Tommy, the tour guide, had emphasized the risks, especially with it being peak alligator breeding season. Park officials had restricted access to certain areas, posting warning signs about territorial males guarding their nests. But Monica, convinced of her rights as a tax-paying citizen, broke away from the group and paddled her kayak into a restricted lagoon. That lagoon was the territory of a massive 12-foot bull alligator, weighing around 800 pounds. He'd been actively defending his territory for weeks, already driving off smaller males. The vibrations from Monica's paddle strokes were all it took to trigger his aggressive instincts. The attack was swift. The alligator launched itself from the water, its jaws clamping down on Monica's kayak, capsizing it and throwing her into the murky water. In a panic, she struggled, but the alligator saw her as a direct threat to his nesting territory. Its jaws found their mark on her torso, razor-sharp teeth puncturing her life jacket and sinking deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite shattered ribs, punctured lungs, and severed major blood vessels. Then came the death roll, a terrifying technique designed to disorient prey and inflict catastrophic internal trauma. The alligator spun rapidly, Monica trapped in its jaws, tearing muscles and causing unspeakable injuries. The violent rotation filled her punctured lungs with water, the crushing press preventing her from breathing. The death roll continued for what must have felt like an eternity, until finally her struggles ceased. Her lifeless body floated to the surface. Meanwhile, on May 14, 2017, in the majestic Great Smoky Mountains National Park, another encounter with nature was unfolding. Sarah Johnson, a 29-year-old nurse, was hiking with her fiancé, Tom. The late spring afternoon was perfect. Sunlight filtering through the trees, wildflowers painting the forest floor. Sarah, a keen photographer, always carried her camera to capture their adventures. Her medical background gave her a practical understanding of emergencies, but her experience with dangerous wildlife was limited. They were enjoying a weekend getaway, a welcome break from her demanding job at a busy trauma center. That afternoon, they stumbled upon two black bear cubs playing in a meadow, their mother nowhere in sight. Sarah recognized this as a unique photo opportunity. Black bears are common, but a mother bear with cubs, that's a different story. They become exponentially more aggressive, seeing any human nearby as a mortal threat. They will attack without warning. I've read accounts of their incredible strength and speed. They can run up to 30 miles per hour through dense forest. It's a force of nature defending its own. I remember reading the details of Sarah's story, and it stayed with me for days. She and Tom were on an engagement trip, hoping to capture some incredible memories. Sarah started photographing some adorable cubs, thinking she was at a safe distance. But her excitement got the better of her, and she gradually moved closer for better shots. Tom, bless his heart, kept urging her to keep her distance, to leave the area, but Sarah was convinced the mother bear wasn't nearby. The cubs continued their playful wrestling in the meadow grass, while she documented every move. This photography session went on for nearly 10 minutes as she captured dozens of images. Sarah's fatal mistake, as I understand it, was positioning herself between the cubs and their natural escape route to the forest. As she moved to get a better angle, she unknowingly blocked their path to safety. This triggered the protective instincts of their mother, who had been watching from the tree line. The mother bear's charge from the forest was swift and terrifying. The 200-pound female covered the distance to Sarah in seconds. Her powerful legs propelled her with surprising speed. Her fury focused entirely on eliminating the perceived threat to her cubs. Sarah tried to retreat when she saw the charging bear, but her foot caught on a fallen log, and she tumbled backward, still clutching her camera. The mother bear reached Sarah before she could regain her footing, striking her with bone-crushing force. Her massive paw connected with Sarah's back, her razor-sharp claws raking across Sarah's spine and shoulders, the impact shattering several ribs. Sarah's camera flew from her grip as the bear's enormous weight pinned her to the ground. Her attempts to call for help were silenced by the crushing prise on her chest. The mother bear's powerful jaws clamped down on Sarah's neck, her crushing bite force fracturing vertebrae and severing vital arteries. The bear's protective instincts drove her to continue the assault until she was certain the threat to her cubs had been completely eliminated. Within minutes, Sarah's movement ceased as the mother bear's brutal assault proved fatal. The protective mother remained near Sarah's body for several more minutes, ensuring the threat was neutralized before gathering her cubs and disappearing into the dense forest. Park rangers arrived over an hour later in response to Tom's emergency call. But Sarah was already dead from massive trauma. The bear family was tracked but left undisturbed as wildlife officials determined the mother had been acting within normal protective behavioral patterns when defending her young. Sarah's death devastated the hiking community and prompted enhanced educational programs about wildlife safety and proper distance protocols. Her family established a foundation promoting wilderness safety education, ensuring her passion for conservation would continue through enhanced protection for both wildlife and outdoor enthusiasts.